Hello.
Nice to see you.
Thanks so much for having us.
I think if I don't see you every 2 weeks, something wrong.
Until Bob Cole retired, it was me and you and Bob Cole flying every Sunday. And hopefully we'll still see Bob kicking around. Nice to see you. Thanks so much for having us on.
Nice to see you too. This is an interesting EP. I really love it, and of course, I love listening to it. It's a pretty country EP.
Yeah.
Is that intentional?
Oh yeah. I spent the last year and a bit writing songs with my favorite songwriters that I could get to work with, and of course, and in some cases, my favorite songwriters in the world. Like our friend Donovan remains one of my favorite writers on earth.
Donovan Woods, yeah, incredible.
And if I could choose 3 writers on earth to get to write with, Donovan would still be one of them.
Yeah, right.
And as luck would have it, I got to work with Donovan and his camp, and Todd Clark's camp, and Gavin and all those gang that hang around in that camp, most of the Canadian guys in Nashville.
Yeah.
And so I wrote songs with them for the last year and a bit, and my favorite ones sounded like country songs for obvious reasons. They work primarily in the country world, and I was like, man, I've made rock music and I've made pop music and Celtic music. Let's make a country tinged record, and it felt a bit more organic than probably you might think, because my first invitation into the Canadian country music world, per se, was in like 2012 or whatever, when Dean Brody asked Great Big Sea and the guys to do this song called It's Friday.
Yeah.
And that was a big country hit for him. And it was all tinged with, Newfoundland sounds and squeezy accordions and whistles and all that stuff. And in talking to him and talking to like Tim Hicks and even Jess and Brett Kissel and a bunch of that gang, I just became aware over the last, say, half dozen years or whatever, how influential the Celtic scene of the mid-'90s was for modern. Well,
Spirit of the West.
Rankins.
Rankin
oh
family.
my God, the Rankins. And that got me thinking about sort of the bridge between Canadian country music and Atlantic Canadian music. And because I guess if you didn't think about it, it might seem like a bit of a leap, but if you draw a line, like you think about the Rankins, who were my favorite Celtic band ever, very quickly, in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were walking the line between country music and traditional music. And then you look a brushstroke back further than that, and Rita was doing it all the time.
Rita McNeil, yeah.
Right? And even go back to Anne Murray.
Yeah.
And Anne was doing it. And so and then you couple that with the fact that, some of my favorite writers, Donovan, as you say, but then Ron Hines.
Yeah.
Lenny Gallant, Gordie Sampson, all those guys are Atlantic Canadian guys, and who, when they're not writing Celtic music, they're writing country music. Like, they seem closer cousins than we might imagine.
Tell me about Rough Side Out.
Oh, well, I know that you know, but I'll tell it for your listeners.
Thank you.
I love it so much.
That's the name of the EP, I should say.
Yeah, thank you. The Rough Side Out, for your listeners, of course, refers to, if you imagine those jelly bean houses that you see on all the Newfoundland tourism ads or whatever.
The big, beautiful, colorful houses, yeah.
So those are covered in what's called rough side out clapboard. And what's significant about that, of course, is that when clapboard, or that wooden siding, was originally made, right, one side of it was planed or smoothened or sanded, if you will, right? And that was meant to be the side that was outside, and then the rough part would be inside. But Newfoundlanders, being practical as they are and preferring practicality over fashion, figured out that if you flip it round, the paint stays on it longer.
Right.
Right? And of course, that's why in a foggy, misty, windy, cold place, we have these bright colored houses that look like they were painted yesterday, because rough side out makes them last longer. And it ends up being something that's, was chosen for practicality, that ends up becoming quite beautiful. And when I told that story to an editor friend of mine when I was working on my first book, she giggled and she said, well, there you have it. Newfoundland houses and Newfoundland men, both rough side out.
I was gonna say, like, do you see a connection here? Is the title intentional for something about your own life or your own career? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. It's always been that way. I love thinking that I'm here for not for the best looking weekend or the most fun weekend, but for the long haul. I didn't get in music to get out of music. I didn't get in bands in the early 1980s, for God's sake, with my uncles.
Right.
To have the biggest hit in the world so I could move to Spain or something in a villa. I wanted to play concerts with lots of people or with a few people, whether it's, a hockey rink or a festival or a New Year's Eve, jam at Mallard Cottage.
That we just did, yeah.
It's fine with me. I want a life in music, and that's why I'll put whatever side comes out that makes me last the longest. I'm happy with that.
If you're just tuning in, Alan Doyle is my guest. His new EP is called Rough Side Out, and it's out everywhere tomorrow. And speaking of that, you talk about how, you wanted to be in it for the long haul, and you have been in it for the long haul. To me, I think that the big break for you was the Up record.
Yeah.
The Great Big Sea record, the second Great Big Sea record.
Yeah.
A lot of people would think of it as the first Great Big Sea record, but it's actually the second Great Big Sea record.
Yeah.
And that was 25 years ago
Yeah.
that came out. What do you remember from that?
Well, quite a bit, to be honest
I'm
with you.
surprised.
Yeah, no, quite a bit. Because we were just, my God, we were so excited, So we'd done our own little indie record down in Dermot O'Reilly's basement in 1993. And it came out in August of 1993. And we had sold, a bunch of copies of that. And again, we were in the middle of that big Celtic wave and by 1994, most record companies, including Warner Music, had recently signed the Irish Descendants, and, the Barras were doing very well, and the Rankins and Natalie and Ashley and all that stuff. And we got signed to a record deal. We couldn't believe it, And I guess it must have been in the spring of the winter of 1995, Danny Greenspoon, wonderful producer, Canadian music producer, produced a lot of Spirit of the West and a bunch of Barry McNeil's and a whole bunch of amazing stuff. Spirit of the West, awesome. He came to Newfoundland, and we set up a makeshift studio in the lowest level of what was called the Battery Hotel. So it looked an old ballroom. It's now part of Memorial University, as you know, but it looks over St. John's Harbor. And it was just this empty ballroom, and we set up some machines and some gear, and we banged it off. And it was just a thrill because really and truly, we had hobbled together that record, the Great Big Sea record, before just by our own knowledge and with the help of Pat Janes. But really, we didn't know anything about making records, at all. And Danny Greenspoon had made lots of them, and he was our first real sort of musical guide. And I learned more, I think, in that month or whatever, making that record than I probably have learned since.
What a revelation that record was. Not just because you still perform a lot of those songs on that record, but because I can't go to a bar, a pub in North America without hearing songs from that record. It's become, like that John Cougar Mellencamp record you mentioned, just one of those touchstones.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's such a wonderful thing to be part of a holy place for me, right? To be the soundtrack of the pub is not a bad place to be.
No.
And I do have a mad amount of respect for pub music and social music and places that even in an odd academic sense, I think it's very valuable and very, very important, and it's very difficult to do right.
Joyful music.
Yeah, joyful music that's done appropriately and right is extremely difficult to do. And to be part of the the North American or whatever, the world pub soundtrack, even to get one song on it, let alone a whole record, is a thrill of a lifetime, no doubt about it.
That's been something I've been thinking about with you for a long time, and you and I have talked a lot about it and telling kind of stories backstage, is that, there is room in this world. There's definitely room in this world for contemplative music and sad music and music that tells a story and music that tells an important story, but sometimes we can diminish the importance of joyful music, of happy music.
Yeah, because I think people would think that that's easier. Mm-hmm. And in fact, every musician knows it's the opposite. It's easier to write a sad song than a happy one, right? And sometimes what, has to happen in joyful music is that the reason why it's amazing is people don't ever realize it, you and I were talking one time about Home for a Rest,
Spirit of the West.
Amazing Spirit of the West song. And of course, the poetry of that song in this bar drinking swill thing is incredible, The gas heater's empty, it's dank as a tomb, and the spirits we drank are now ghosts in the room. I'm knackered again, come on, sleep, take me soon, and don't lift up my bells. I lift my head till the 12 bells. It's just beautiful. That's the trick. That's the one of the tricks anyway to doing it. But no, you're right. I've always been super grateful to Sean and Bob and Daryl for sort of really helping me get an introduction into traditional Newfoundland music, because I knew a bit about playing Celtic music and Irish music before Great Big Sea started growing up in my family. And I knew, stuff, I played in rock bands and stuff already, but they knew a ton about Newfoundland traditional music because they'd played together in a band before. And so those three guys were and remain three of the most influential people in my musical life.
It's a beautiful record you got here. It's a beautiful record you made back then, and I still put it on all the time. It's a beautiful EP. You're going to head over and play another song from it?
Yes, sir. We'll play a contemplative one.
Oh, how nice!
I thought we'd mix it up for you.
We're gonna get contemplative a little bit.
A little bit. This is a song we're going to do a song called "Okay," and it's really a tip of the hat to the people I've been working with over the last few years in mental health and addictions. Just because we come to discover that people really need a pat on the back and a reminder that it's going to be okay. And when we're working with things like $1aday.ca,
this is your mental health foundation.
Yeah, we've come to learn that people need that, and I'm happy to offer it.